A number of people have been arrested across the UK after violence broke out at protests. The violence was sparked after disinformation spread online about the fatal stabbing of 3 girls in Southport.
Well, British MP John Woodcock, Lord Walney, is a former independent advisor to the government on political violence and disruption. He says the tragedy is being exploited by far-right groups.
The deaths of these poor little girls and the injuries to others has triggered a set of events which really bears no direct relation at all to the tragedy that has happened. And you've had far-right activists spreading misinformation about the origins, the background of the person who has been charged with their murder now, and then a rolling situation of so-called protests being organised in towns which are really just a front and a platform for violent disorder.
Yeah, I want to come back to the spread of misinformation in just a moment, but for now, I know that there are fears of reprisals following these ongoing riots, and leaders of minority groups are warning that their communities are vulnerable to these particular extremist groups who are growing in influence, it seems. Are their fears justified?
Well, the far right has organisationally been at a relatively low ebb. The fact that we've moved really quickly into an age where there is abundant social media and there are communication channels provided by those social media platforms, and so you've got really often well known to the police, at least, ringleaders from the far right who are able to whip up discontent and spread things really quickly. It's proving a huge challenge for the police to be able to get on top of that and restore the deterrent effect to try to put some of this stuff back in its box.
Right. You know, the violence is also being blamed on misinformation spread on social media. It's an issue that's being hotly debated here in Australia as well, particularly after a couple of riotous incidents. What's the discussion in the UK over holding social media platforms responsible for the spread of misinformation?
We've got a really live debate here, and I think it does have parallels with what seems to be happening down there in Australia. And this is a complex and difficult issue because absolutely, I think platforms need to do more to shut down misinformation quite often. But it's important that we can continue to have the space to be able to debate ideas and not move too quickly to shut things down in ways that can ultimately aggravate the sense that there are a bunch of things that you're not allowed to talk about. And indeed, you know, liberal democracies require that level of space for there to be controversy. So where you draw the line on that is a complex thing. But one of the recommendations in my review is that we need a greater focus and more capability on the way in which hostile states will now systematically seek to create misinformation and certainly to fan those flames with often large troll factories of state employees who will have fake identities and pretend to be Brits. They will do this, or pretend to be Australians on social media, and take the pulse of those debates. And we'll all probably come to a different place about precisely, how much a person with idiotic opinions over here in Britain ought to be able to have the freedom to say idiotic things. But we ought to be able to all agree that the way in which this has been falsely manipulated by hostile states needs to be cracked down on to the greatest extent possible.
John Woodcock, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thanks so much. Good to talk to you.